Hey, it's Soul with some War Within Alpha coverage. Today we're going to do a quick flyover of the items that we'll be able to make in WoW's next expansion. Now, numbers can always change, a number of items are placeholder, and we don't have a firm grasp of how the progression towards making these items is going to work, so yeah, it's not going to be a deep dive, but more of a flyover, a glimpse of what's to come. Please hit the like button, subscribe for more WoW coverage, and catch me live in the mornings on Twitch. Use the navigation below to get to where you want to go, but first I want to talk generally about the items across most professions that I call the steps of production. For example, alloy is made from ore and goes into making plate armor and weapons. Inks are made from herbs and they go into staves and Vantis runes and the like, and I've noticed that a lot of folks overlook these items in the middle as kind of a nuisance, and for a good reason. It's not the cool item we want to make in the end, and that's what we're conditioned to care about, right? Also, the quality of these reagents mattered only under certain conditions because crafters for the most part relied on luck or inspiration to max out an item's quality. It gets more than a bit confusing to talk about the nuance of quality and inspiration in Dragonflight, but in the War Within that's going to change a lot. A new resource called Concentration makes it so that the quality of gathered materials and the steps of production matter a lot more, especially for crafters who want to spend significant parts of their time crafting. We're not close to accurate measurement yet, but here's the basic gist. With reasonable efforts towards upping skill and applying specializations, I should be able to create a handful of max quality potions with rank 2 materials and reagents thanks to this concentration resource. Concentration is going to be great for the kind of crafter who only makes items for themselves. Now, a serious crafter will want to get the best quality ingredients or reagents to reduce or even eliminate the need for concentration so they can mass produce potions as opposed to the more casual crafter. Going back to the steps of production, career-minded crafters are going to care about quality materials a lot more, and since these can be sold across the region-wide auction house, it's a much more effective specialization to invest into than it was in Dragonflight. At least that's the theory. That said, I'm not going to talk very much about the steps of production across War Within professions or the profession tools because all that stuff seems to be the same, and I'm going to put more focus on the end products that I've found so far. The feel and flow of Alchemy hasn't changed all that much. Flasks have returned, complete with a good old 1 hour cooldown, but instead of primary stats, flasks have shifted their focus entirely towards secondaries. There's also a flask of alchemical chaos that provides an even greater increase, but this bonus rotates every 30 seconds, and it also subtracts a bit from your stats that aren't affected. Finally, there's a healing-focused flask where the uptime is dependent on the healer casting a heal on targets below 25% health. The proc is useful when it needs to be, but it isn't likely to offer very high uptime. There are also flasks based on PvP. They provide some fun effects and increase your honor gains while they're active. Something interesting to point out is this vicious flask of classical spirits, which increases mana regeneration. As a protection paladin who casts heals very often, I kinda wonder if this can work in PvE content because if so, I could actually benefit from this. I mean, it's kind of a crazy idea, but this did cross my mind. Files are still around, they just apply to profession stats including Perception for gathering and Ingenuity, making this file a must-have for serious crafters. Cooldown pots are the usual fare, and the go-to is probably going to be the Tempered Potion, which has also moved towards giving secondary stats. This is funny though, it'll provide you with all the secondary stat bonuses that you get from the flasks that you're not using for 30 seconds, so this is kind of wild. There's the usual healing and mana potions, including this agonizing potion that makes you spend health instead of mana for 6 casts. So basically you would need to use over 120,000 or so mana in these 6 casts for the mana pot to be worth it, and even then it's probably not as useful as a well-timed mana sleep potion. Most recipes in the alpha are still placeholder, but there doesn't seem to be a War Within equivalent to the Rousing or the Awakened element, at least not in the same way. Transmutes are still a thing, and my attention is directed to this Gleaming Chaos, which will let you produce an epic gem for jewel crafters once a day. The other transmutes aren't fully understood yet, but have the same limitations that you're used to, as well as a specialization to support it. And of course, we can't forget about the Alchemy Stone Trinket with the increased potency buff. Blacksmithing doesn't appear to be offering anything new, but as blacksmithing being one of my main professions, I can speak to it a little bit more. There are going to be tiers of alloy that blacksmiths will make, as in we take raw ore and turn it into a tier 1 alloy, and fold it with more ore, then turn it into like a tier 2 alloy, and then take those and make it into something else altogether before making the usable items like gear. Again, I'm pointing this out for the folks out there who want to use their profession to make money but don't care for crafting orders, as I explained at the top of this video. As usual, blacksmiths will make most melee weapons, including one-handed caster weapons and plate armor. They're making whetstones for interested melee characters and profession folk too. I'm not too sure if this is going to help out with all professions or if it's just going to be gathering like in Dragonflight. Of course, what's a profession without some special embellished gear? It's not specifically pointed out in the tooltips, but recipes are listed under the header embellished gear. Let's take a look. The Light Watcher's visor acts sort of like the allied pieces in Dragonflight, but not really. It provides secondary stat buffs that can be spread to a buddy. Probably not my first pick, especially because it's a helmet slot and engineering is my other main profession and they'll be able to make goggles. The Sanctified Steps is a funny one for tank specs. It gives you speed increases until you basically explode for damage on your next ability. Sadly though, it seems that embellished gear is leaning further towards weapons that at least have some interesting effects. The Echoing Truncheon reflects a lot of effects and abilities that we'll see in the War Within, with the subtraction of lower stats in favor of a higher stat, which I'm not complaining about. The likes of Haunting Void remind me of Corruptions. They grant a buff, but also adds a mechanic that the player has to avoid to maintain said buff, but at least it won't kill you. Enchanting isn't adding anything super duper new, but it's changing up a few of its enchants and they're kind of interesting. Take for example these ring enchants that are pretty much like reforging. They subtract a secondary stat and provide more of a different stat. You want to take a good look at these because you might want haste, but versatility might happen to also be a desired stat for your class or spec. There are only 4 of these enchants, so it's going to be up to you which to take, or of course you can take these standard stat enchants too, those are still there. Weapon enchants look both familiar and fun, with choices between stat and direct damage procs, radiating heals, and damage shields for tanks. Weapon oils are coming here too, to add a bit of extra stats, direct damage, or healing. And I noticed this finishing reagent that makes crafts use a tiny bit less concentration on a craft. Because it's using a percentage though, and not a numerical value, this bonus doesn't really mean too much. At least the tooltip reads as it subtracts 3% of the concentration cost. So it's not going to do squat for a craft that might only need 10 concentration to rank up. Even if it needed 100 concentration, the discount would be like a whopping 3 points. Engineering as usual brings us lots of fun little items that tend to feel like an over-investment, but let's have a look anyway. There's a mount! Yeah! Also, jumper cables will be able to be used by anyone and is now a separate consumable as opposed to an enchant on gear. Raid Wipe Recovery returns in the form of a big red button that hopefully won't immediately kill you afterwards. There's this interesting pausing pylon that freezes the duration of your consumable buffs, which is kind of nice when the team is going over strats between pulls. Keep in mind that at any point the engineering requirement can still be thrown on, but for now, seeing it like this, it's pretty cool. There's still no Blingtron to be found, but there is a repair bot and a crafting table that I'm going to presume will work for all professions and not just a few. There are these new potion bombs that provide some group buffs while damaging enemies. Again, notice that there's no profession requirement, at least for now. This introduces some kind of interesting gameplay though. Imagine using the Potion of Power multiple times for the group consecutively, providing stats over a longer period than you would get individually, and this particular potion provides primary stats when alchemy potions only provide secondaries. Odds are pretty good that this will be retuned in a way to avoid having balls of players throwing potions on each other being a DPS meta, but they're still very neat. Craftable guns, goggles like I mentioned, and bracers are making a return in the War Within, and they're going to work the same way. There are a few new tinkers, including a kind of replacement potion with a catch, and with the right specialization, engineers can make new versions of the Dragonflight tinkers, which is really nice that those tinkers will have a bit more longevity. Leatherworking feels familiar with its round of consumables like armor kits and drums and embellishments that increase stats and strengthens embellished gear, which we can take a first look at. These two pieces have powerful procs, but with a cost, and with this optional reagent, both kinds of effects are doubled. Maybe you don't want to suddenly lose 50% of your speed off a random proc, but maybe you love the chaos. There are other individual embellished pieces, as well as sets, 3 pieces with a 2-set bonus, so you can sort of choose which slots you want to work with. Unfortunately, the likes of Inscription and Tailoring are very limited in their offerings in the current alpha, but I'll show you what I can. Data mining has shown that Darkmoon decks are still a thing and are likely to be supported in the same way. Missives, Vantis runes, and contracts are back, but weapon runes don't seem to be. Maybe that's why Enchanting has mana oils again. Staves and offhands are back, but embellishments haven't been added yet. I guess one nice thing for Inscription though is that there are actually only 2 kinds of inks as opposed to having way too many of them in Dragonflight, which should greatly reduce the less glamorous work of processing, but there's still more to come. We'll see what happens. Tailoring has the least to show, with gear that has no embellishments, the usual spell threads, and oddly enough, lots of bags are showing up on the crafting menu, including a satchel of the long day or night. Just like in Dragonflight, there are going to be 2 different kinds of special cloth to make with specializations around those. It's likely that these will be extremely valuable at the start of the expansion and should have some staying power with concentration in play. One thing that was especially lacking were just kind of fun items, fun, silly items, toys, mounts, and whatnot. There's a couple that we've seen. Like I said, we saw something from engineering, but at the moment that's it. So I wouldn't exactly judge yet. This is, again, just a first look. That's going to be a wrap for now, and you can expect me to revisit every profession at length as we get closer to the War Within launch, from what we can make to possible build ideas to make your desired items most efficiently. Please like the video if it was useful, subscribe for more WoW coverage, catch me live in the mornings on Twitch, and I'll see you next time. Stay safe, stay healthy, and stay breezy.